Mr. LaForge, is penetration possible? I don't know just yet, Captain. It may be an option. That's what she said! Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the Royale, which is episode 12 of season 2 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the episode The Royale. So The Royale is the episode where the Enterprise are investigating an alien planet, and they find signs that a 21st century human from Earth has been there, and there's a weird structure in the middle of an inhospitable planet. So they beam down and they find themselves stuck in the Royale, which is playing out the events of a terribly written 20th century novel. They find that astronaut did in fact end up there and was killed by this alien by accidents, and where the alien killed his crew, but he was the sole survivor, and so they recreated what they thought was a human environment by using the poorly written novel The Royale, and which had been running for several centuries. And now Riker, Worf, and Data are trapped in this terribly written novel about a casino and trying to find their way out. And they eventually discovered that they can play the part of the foreign investors, and if they win a lot of roulette, they have enough money to buy the casino, which allows them to walk through the doors and leave, and everything is okay. So let me just get this out of the way. First of all, once of all, let me just get this out of my system. The Royale with cheese. Sorry, every time I think of the title of the episode, that's what I think. The Royale with cheese. You know what they call a quarter pounder in France? No, they don't know what the metric system is, and they had no idea. They call it a Royale with cheese. The Royale with cheese. Anyway, that's out of my system. Now let's talk about the episode. So, a lot of people hate this episode. I think you will see that reflected on my page, some of my Patreon comments. It's reflected on a lot. I think IMDb, this episode is very low. I didn't look it up exactly, but it's low, trust me. And a lot of reviews I saw really trashed this episode. I watched The Seventh Rule with Sirach Laughlin, and usually they're positive on almost every episode. They were positive on Justice. Well, so am I, but still, they were positive. There was another episode I didn't like that they were positive. Well, I don't remember. But they weren't positive on this one. Sirach Laughlin in particular thought this episode was boring and didn't really have a point to it. The YouTube channel Lore Runner, who does lamentations for episodes that he thinks are at the worst, didn't do a lamentation for this one, but he said he was considering it. That was close to lamentation status. And then, of course, I watched some other reviews as well that really didn't like this episode. I like this episode, kind of like it. I'm gotta be honest. Again, this is another time where I'm going to disagree with the popular opinion. I will say Wes from the Penske File, who's been on my channel a couple times, also likes this episode. So there you go. I'm not alone. My sister hates this episode. but anyway, so here's the one definitive statement I will like say outright from the start, just to make very clear. This episode's better, way better, far superior than Bada Bing Bada Bang. Fuck that episode. Bada Bing Bada Bang, of course, is the D Space Nine Vic Fontaine centric episode, and it's a similar theme. To be fair, they both take place in a casino in the 50s, 60s era. At least I think this is the 60s era. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. But anyway, so they both take place during a casino. Could it be 80s for all I know? But anyway, it doesn't matter. They both take place during a casino in Las Vegas, and they're both like involve cheesy casino cliches. But unlike Bada Bing Bada Bang, this episode is fun. Where that episode is not fun! Not fun! How many times do I have to say it? How many times do I have to scream it from the rooftops? Episode is not, with a capital N, not fun. You don't fight anyone on that. If you don't know, I've named that episode one of the 10 worst episodes in the entire franchise, and trust me, I firmly stand by that. Even though that is the episode I got the most pushback from in my top 10 worst, but I don't care. I'll fight anyone on that. That episode is not fun! I make it clear that it's not fun because that's what everyone says who either likes the episode or thinks it's okay. Oh, it's a lot of fun. No, it's not! It is not! It is the definition of not fun. Anyway, sorry. It's a cheesy cliche, by the numbers, Hollywood heist, casino heist, cliche, stereotype, done completely poorly with entire plot contrivance of foundation of bullshit. Anyway, sorry. I'm not here to talk about Bada Bing Bada Bing. I'm here to talk about the Royale. And say what you want about the Royale, with or without cheese. say what you want about it, but at least its plot makes sense and it's interesting. Unlike the In fact, one of the things I was thinking about while watching this episode, that at least it's not a holodeck. That's actually a huge positive for me. I would actually probably put this episode above, dare I say, I'm going to ruffle some feathers here, but even slightly above Elementary Dear Data and The Big Goodbye. Because those had those holodeck safeties malfunctioning and the contrivance of them getting stuck in a holodeck, which this episode does not have. And that's actually a huge plus for me. Now, that's not to say this episode is not without its fair share of plot holes, because it certainly is. Something that really gets me about this episode every time I watch it is, why is it that Riker and Worf and Data can't leave? That doesn't really seem to make sense, and their phasers have no effect. So it's if these aliens created this environment with the intention of mind of overcoming 24th century Starfleet technology, but this human is from the 21st century, somewhere in between 2033 and 2033 and 2059, I think it is, or 2073 maybe it was, somewhere in between there apparently, because they could tell this because the United States has 52 stars, which I seriously doubt 2 more stay. Well, people are trying to make DC and Puerto Rico a state right now, but the Republicans are blocking them because they know that they would lose the majority because they're both Democratic states. But anywho, you never know. Maybe by 2133 could happen. Anyway, and then what happens after in 2171? According to Strange New Worlds, there's going to be an American Civil War, so really there should be less than 52 states before that time, because they said the American Civil War is going to happen sometime in the 2050s. Anyway, that's, when is it that World War III is supposed to take place? Isn't that sometime in the wouldn't that be before? Maybe that's this 2071. Anyway, off topic. Because isn't the 23rd to 22nd century is Enterprise times. So that's supposed to take place this century. And it wasn't First Contact, I don't know. I didn't look up the Star Trek timeline. It doesn't matter. It's all bullshit. They're going to retcon it just like they retcon retcon. Anyway, from the 1990s to now it's in the 2050s. But whatever. Anyway, That's all beside the point. So they know. So these aliens created this environment for a 21st century human. So why did they create the environment to combat 24th century technology? And why would it want to trap visitors in this thing? Like you can say, oh, maybe they didn't mean for it to trap them. That's just a side effect. I don't know, I guess, but I don't really. It's kind of convenient for the plot. A bit too much, in my opinion. And also, why is there like a doorway before and when they walk into the revolving door? Because again, keep in mind this is an inhospitable planet that was created just for this astronaut guy. So why would they create just a blank space where he can't leave the planet? So he's going to walk out and look at the storms and come back in, I guess. And how come you're able to beam them up in that empty corridor but not inside the building? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, yes. So the foundation of the plot is a contrivance, to be fair. And I'm not saying this is a great episode. Do not get me wrong. Do not make me, misunderstand me here. I'm saying I love this episode. I don't. But I'm just comparing it to other episodes that I think are worse. And the holodeck cliches bother me more than this plot hole. I will be honest about that. Probably that may have a lot to do with the fact that they do it over and over again. And to me, it's a bit more contrived. Because this at least is an inventive idea. This is, the alien found this human astronaut and created a fake environment for him based off a book. That's an original idea. That's a cool idea. Holodeck, that's just a holodeck. Oh, and there's the holodeck. We're going to go in the holodeck again, and it's going to, even though it's supposed to be an entertainment system, it's going to malfunction and threaten to kill everyone in it. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I give more strikes to holodeck episodes than I do to this one. 3 strikes and you're out. Anyway, like taking me out to the holosuites. Anyway, that was like 6 strikes by the time we get to that episode, which, the safeties didn't malfunction, but it sucked because it's not fun. Anyway, another episode that's not fun. Anyway, I thought this episode was fun. I liked the sort of interaction between the cowboy guy and Data. I'm sorry. I thought that was funny. I thought that was cool. The stuff they did with the Mickey D, I didn't know if they were also going to introduce his friends, Jack and the Bee and Burger K. Yeah, I stole that joke from Sarah Clawson. I'm sorry. I'll say that right up front. But that's all I can think about now. But anyway... or Colonel S. But anyway, the whole thing with him and the bellboy guy, that seemed really like an aside, nothing to do with nothing. At least Data was interacting with the weird cowboy guy. But and some of the interactions with Riker trying to figure out what's going on, and he goes to the manager, the assistant manager, and is like, "What planet is this?" He's like, "What? He's like, "What do you call this planet?" It's like, "Earth. What do you call it?" And Worf's like, "We call it Delta 7 or whatever it was," and he's like, "How charming," and walks away. Like, that's funny. I like that. I think that stuff's fun, and I think the scene when they go up and find the skeletal remains of Colonel Ritchie, the astronaut, I thought that was a creepy scene. I thought that really set the tone for this creepy episode, and it really, and how he wrote in the journals, like, I don't hold any animosity towards my benefactors because they couldn't possibly know the hell that they would be putting me through. That's actually fascinating. That's a really dark idea that I'm here for. Like, I really like that. But okay, let me jump back to another flaw though. The fact that they base this whole thing off of a book, and this is kind of similar to what I'm talking when I might complain of the episode A Piece of the Action, that they were able to emulate every minor detail, every prop, every street light, every fire hydrant, and up to the way that people talked and the exact thing they behaved, things they did based off of one book, written words on the page. No way, that's bullshit. But to be fair, I actually give this episode a little bit more leeway than A Piece of the Action, because those were just normal people who were imitative, whereas these were like really powerful aliens that could have like supreme technology or maybe telepathy. So maybe they could have read, and again, I'm totally making shit up here. This does not stated in the episode at all, but it's a headcanon like excuse. Maybe that they could read Colonel Richie's mind somewhat and sort of extrapolate from the novel and say, oh, this is how people would react. But of course, they couldn't read his mind well enough to tell that he thought that this was shit and it was hell for him. But maybe a selective mind reading. I don't know. Maybe their mind reading only goes so far. I don't know. This is all complete headcanon. But either way, it doesn't bother me as much as something as A Piece of the Action. But it is still a plot hole. It's still like, really? They created everything so specific and so detailed based off of written words on a page from one book? Kind of doubt that. But anyway. Yeah, the stuff with Data, like playing roulette. Alright, another flaw, another plot hole. Sorry, gotta get into this. When he starts winning over and over, he wins like something like 18 times in a row. Any casino worth their salt would have thrown him out. Even if they couldn't prove that he was cheating, they would be like, yeah, you're cut off. Get the hell out of here. There's no way. It's like the odds, the probability of someone winning 18 times in a row is so low that they would assume you're cheating. And by the way, he was able to like adjust the dice to roll the way that he won, and like was able to throw them a certain way. And there's no way that they would have been like, oh, they owe them like $2.5 million, however much it was, and be like, oh, we can't afford to pay you, and the record be like, okay, so we're going to buy this place. They would be like, oh, you fucking cheated. But of course, you'd have to have the cool scene of them playing playing casino games in order to get the money, which was done again, but not quite as bad in Times Zero when Data plays poker. Another thing that I have to point out that I forgot to mention in my review and my revisited for Measure of the Man is the Measure of a Man was the first time we actually see the crew playing poker on screen, and we haven't seen them since that episode, so we haven't gotten a return to them playing poker. Not yet. I think that's coming up next week in Times Square. But they mentioned, Data mentions how, is it similar to poker? Because he played poker before, and he's sort of similar. He's sort of gotten the hang of these games of chance. But something like 21 and roulette. Not roulette. What is it that he plays? No, it's not roulette. Did I say he won roulette? It was craps. Sorry. Craps. I said roulette before. That's my mistake. Someone's already corrected me in the comments, I'm sure. But anyway, so that's a bit different than poker and easier to fix, I think, obviously, because he just fixes the dice to come out. Although he could have... I don't buy, by the way, that Data doesn't know what counting cards is when, the other person is saying accused him of counting cards. He's like, why would one count cards? He would know what that means, especially since he studied poker and games of chance or whatever. But anyway, because he certainly could count cards in poker, but, decides not to. Anywho, it's funny, I got into arguments with people saying counting cards was not cheating. It's just a different way of playing the game. That's weird, because I always heard counting cards specifically as cheating, but maybe that's a casino's perspective. But they were saying these casinos were wrong to call that cheating. I think it's very obviously cheating. But anyway, that's off topic. Because it's taking the element of chance out. But anyway, casinos kind of rig it in their favor anyway. But anywho, how did they know, like, why weren't there already foreign investors in this? Because there's different versions of all these different characters already. How come there weren't already foreign investors there? How come there were none and Riker was able to take their role over? How does that work, huh? Anyway, to be clear, most of those minor complaints I have don't bother me that much, because I kind of turned my brain off with this episode to begin with, because it is one of those, although that's something I said I refused to do in Bada Bing Bada Bang. I said I refused to turn my brain off. But those contrivances, to be clear, were 1,000 times worse than the contrivances in this episode, just to be clear. And also, that episode's not fun, by the way, if I hadn't mentioned that yet. Anyway, and as Vic Fontaine, fuck Vic Fontaine, hashtag fuck Vic Fontaine. Anyway, sorry. Off topic again. Anyway, so yeah, and when Riker's like throwing money around and having fun, and then Data's like does the shit where he's like, baby needs a new pair of shoes, and like ramps it up, like, that's cool. I like that stuff. I like those scenes. I thought that was a lot of fun. So I didn't think this episode was boring. I thought it was kind of eerie at times, and I thought it was fun. So there you go. The Royale with cheese. I kind of liked it. Anyway, I'd like to thank those that support me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me keep continuing with the channel. I'm very humbled by it. I'm really, really thankful. And I do have to repeat this every video because, yes, thank you all for your support. So, a quick shout out to Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Miguelicio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neil Howells. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, got a couple of comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, this episode is so cheesy that in France it's called the Royale with cheese. Right on, Kyrie091. Anyway, next comment is from Greg Marley, who says, this episode typifies the style of the first 2 years, and really even the original series. It's got some silliness, some cliches, though here at least the cliches are intentional since they emerge from the bad novel, and a determination to connect with the audience by rooting the story in 20th century. I actually could imagine this being an original series script, but I've always had a soft spot for this episode. It's just trying to have so much fun. I like seeing Worf try to use an elevator and then a phone, and them not understanding room service. And I generally laughed out loud at the scene with the front desk clerk when he asked what planet they think they're on, and Worf answers, "We call it a Theta 8." And seeing the guys look. But the astronaut's last statement about not bearing any menace towards the aliens who put him in this endless hotel loop, even though he'd long wished to die, is kind of haunting. Seeing Picard helplessly cooped up on the ship while the action unfolds below reminds you of the storytelling needs that lead Kirk to always go down to the planet, even though realistically that doesn't make sense. The TNG rule that the captain would no longer lead away teams must have really challenged the writers to figure out how to give Picard something to do and keep him from looking useless or peripheral to the plot. Nonetheless, they often wound up having to find a reason for him to beam down too, so he could take part in the main action. Yeah, I will say that is something that later seasons overcame. I think partly that was by not focusing too much on the away team, the mission to the planet, the way that the original series did with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. They were doing that in the first couple of seasons a bit more because they were still working off that TOS formula. But I think in later seasons, they kind of made it less important and made what was happening on the ship more important, or just had Picard beam down and just fuck it if it was important, which didn't happen all too often. In the first 2 seasons, like last week's episode, Contagion, Picard beamed down, Riker gave him shit about it. But Picard's like, I don't care, I'm overriding you. And I think they did that in the 3rd season a couple times too, but after that they kind of just moved past it. When Picard wanted to beam down, Riker's like, sure, fine, whatever. But it didn't, I think overall they did focus less on the away mission, which I like. In fact, that would go forward with DS9 and Voyager. Of course, DS9 mostly, they hardly ever went to planets, so that wasn't a factor. With Voyager, they would have Chakotay lead away teams, but again, in the same sort of vein as later TNG, where it wasn't the important thing about the episode, and that Janeway still remained the focus, or Janeway would just go down with them for, whatever. But so yeah, I think in the first 2 seasons they were a bit iffy on how to handle that. That was also a good point about Worf using the 20th century technology. When he went to use the elevator and was bumped into it, they already did that in the episode Neutral Zone when he went on that 20th century vessel. Although in that episode, Worf literally bumped into the door, where here he was just like, it must be malfunctioning, and Data then pressed the button. God, Worf, I saw this video, I posted it to my Discord for any of the Patreon supporters on the Discord. I saw this video once of that Worf's greatest enemy in Next Generation was doors, and it had all the a montage of all the scenes of him fighting with doors. There were so many, I was actually surprised. I think they had the one where he bumped into the door from Neutral Zone, but I don't know, I can't remember if they had this one when he was pushing the button or didn't push the button. It was like, it seems to be malfunctioning. I can't remember if they had that one or not, but I know they had the one from the game where he's in the Jeffrey tubes and fighting the door going, it's just, you gotta see, it's funny, so many times he attacks doors. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, Mickey D's The Texan and his floozy date. This somewhat more realistic holodeck created by aliens, I'm not a fan, I admit. Even with Picard and Troy admitting this was a bad novel, that's beside the point. The aliens were cruel to that astronaut who the best he could do was abide by was hopefully decent room service. 1 snake eyes out of 10. 1, yeah, so that's pretty brutal. I will say I've heard other people bring up the fact that just because they say it's a bad novel doesn't excuse the cheesy writing. I humbly disagree, because I think that's actually the whole point. I think it's not like they don't know how to write and they wrote a cliche cheesy story because they're shit at writing and they don't know how to write good characters. It's because they intentionally set out to be what if there was a scenario where our characters were trapped in a bad novel? So what could we do to make this novel as cheesy and poorly written as possible? I think that is an excuse, personally, because that's a concept. Being in a bad novel is a concept. It's not like they wanted that dialogue to be good. They didn't. They wanted it to be bad. And so I think that's a perfectly good excuse. And again, I'm not picking on Norman here, because I know there's other reviews I watched that said the same thing. And yeah, I humbly disagree. I'm not humbly, I strongly disagree. I think that's the whole point, was for it to be bad writing, so it absolutely excuses it. But anyway. So we have another comment from Brandon Neilhouse, who says, far too much like a TOS episode for my liking. Negative 291 degrees Celsius is impossible. The whole hotel scenario was boring. I'm not sure who overacts more, Data or Texas. And again, Worf has trouble opening a door. If you want to watch a legitimately scary episode about gambling, I recommend The Twilight Zone Season 1, Episode 17, The Fever. Special shout out to Alyssa to teaching me what Mickey D means in North America's slang. 2 weighted dice out of 10. So they don't say Mickey D's in Australia and New Zealand. I didn't remember that. I know that they call it Macca's in Australia and New Zealand, which I thought was really weird. Macca's. But I guess they do that instead of Mickey D's. But anyway, I didn't think Data was overacting, but that's just me. Anywho. Next comment is from Ricky. This is actually a decent episode. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of flaws and silliness to it, but not at all as bad as the first season of TNG. I did find certain scenes funny and entertaining, but the whole Royale place that exists just through this dead guy's book was very hard to buy. But, like I said, not worst thing in the world and was entertaining, so my rating is a 6 out of 10. So, my rating for the Royale out of 10 is also going to be, just like Ricky, a 6 good. And again, I know some people might give me shit about this, just like everyone disagreed with my rating for Justice and my rating for Haven. But I liked this episode. I thought it was fun. I thought it was eerie when it was meaning to be eerie. I think, the interaction with Data playing craps was cool. and Worf, like, not knowing what to do with 20th century technology. Also, answering the phone. And it's funny to ask if he wanted room service, and he says that to Riker, and Riker's like, oh, tell him no. And he's like, no! Screams it into the phone. I thought it was a fun episode. I'm sorry, I did. Now, there are plot holes, for sure. That's why this only gets a 6. It doesn't get a 10. But again, the plot holes do not bother me as much as holodeck episodes. Those just irk me more. Because it's meant to be an entertainment system. And to me, it's a weaker excuse to do a 20th century themed episode where they came up with an original idea, at least. Does it totally make sense? No, but at least it's an original idea and it's fun. So yeah, and this is another one where everyone and their mother's going to disagree with me, but I give this a 6. Well, not everyone. Ricky agrees with me. Thanks, Ricky. Anyway, so that's it for my review of the Royale. So I shall be back on Saturday, as I mentioned, to review Time Squared. And then Monday, another original TNG review with the Icarus factor, sorry. And then on Wednesday, review for Pen Pals. And then Thursday, over on Patreon for a revisited for Q Who. That will be for my Patreon supporters coming this Thursday. So be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover TNG and of course do many more videos on Star Trek and many other shows as well. So please be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.